Mom texted, "Don't call or come over. We're over." I stared at the words until they blurred, the kind of message that makes your stomach twist before your heart even catches up. For a second, I thought it was a prank. But then I saw the timestamp, the sharpness of the tone, and I knew it wasn't a mistake. I was done. I was out of the family for good. My name is Amelia Ross, born in 1990 in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Back in my teenage years, I learned quickly that love in our family came with conditions. I wasn't the golden child. That was always my brother, Caleb. He could mess up and still be adored. I could save the day and still be overlooked. I felt invisible, but then something happened that changed everything. Today, at 35, sitting in my studio apartment overlooking downtown Dallas, I'm finally sharing this because silence no longer protects me, it only buries me. If you're listening, drop where you're from in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe, because this story, my story, is for anyone who's ever been treated like they were never enough. I grew up in a family that owned a restaurant called Ross Family Grill. It wasn't fancy, but it was the pride of my parents' lives. Every weekend, people filled the booths, and my dad, Patrick Ross, strutted around like a small-town celebrity. My mom, Diana, ran the cash register and made sure everyone left with a smile. Caleb and I were expected to help after school with him serving, me cleaning up, but the truth was, the restaurant was never mine the way it was his. Even as a kid, I dreamed of colors, furniture layouts, and fabric swatches. I used to rearrange the living room every week, pretending I was on some HGTV show. Dad would laugh and say, "All this decoration nonsense won't put food on the table." When I told him I wanted to be an interior designer, he didn't yell, he laughed. "Why waste money on that? You've got a family business waiting." He wanted me behind the counter, not behind a design board. But I refused. I applied to design school in Dallas and worked 2 part-time jobs to pay for tuition. I took out loans, stayed up late sketching, and cried more nights than I could count. There were times I thought about quitting, especially when Mom would call and say, "Your brother's here helping. Why can't you come home?" That guilt used to crush me. Still, I stayed. When I finally graduated, I started designing small cafes and boutiques. My first client was a woman who owned a flower shop. She told me, "You've got an eye for comfort, not just style." That compliment stuck. Word spread. Within 3 years, my calendar was full, my bills were paid, and for once, I felt proud of what I'd built on my own. But every success came with a tug from home. Mom needed help paying off medical bills. Caleb had debts from his failed ventures. Dad said the restaurant was struggling. I wired money more times than I can remember: rent, repairs, even payroll. Every time I did, I hoped maybe they'd finally see me as part of them. But I never realized that money doesn't buy love, it only rents approval. Things reached a strange turning point when I came home one Thanksgiving. The air was thick with grease and nostalgia. Caleb greeted me like he always did, with a half hug and a smug grin. "Heard you're doing big things in Dallas," he said. "Maybe you can invest in my new place, something classier than this old joint." I smiled, but inside, I felt uneasy. Later that night, I pitched them my own idea. A sustainable design firm that focused on eco-friendly commercial interiors. I told them I was looking for investors, maybe even a small family partnership. Dad barely looked up from his plate. "We're not wasting money on some design fantasy," he said. "Caleb's opening another restaurant in Broken Arrow. That's where the real profit is." It stung. All those years of sending money, all those times I'd saved them from debt, and still, I was the outsider. I went to bed that night trying to swallow my disappointment. The next morning, I heard voices in the kitchen. I wasn't supposed to hear, but the words stuck like splinters. Dad said, "Once we get Caleb's new place running, we'll finalize the will. She doesn't need to be part of it. She's already got her fancy career." Mom sighed. "I know, but she's still our daughter. She made her choice," he said. "Let her live with it." I remember standing by the doorway, holding my breath. I felt my chest tighten, my vision blur. The little girl inside me, the one who used to rearrange the living room just to make Mom smile, shattered completely. That afternoon, I drove back to Dallas without saying goodbye. My phone buzzed hours later with the text that ended everything. Don't call or come over. We're over. I didn't reply right away. I sat in my car, parked outside my apartment, just staring at the screen. It was almost funny, in a bitter kind of way. After all the years I'd spent trying to belong, they'd made the decision easy for me. Still, my hands shook as I typed my final message. Got it. Then I turned my phone off. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat in silence, feeling something unfamiliar, freedom. The kind that comes with heartbreak, yes, but also relief. I'd spent so long building bridges that no one cared to cross. That night, I made myself a simple dinner, lit a candle, and whispered to the quiet room. No more. The days that followed were strange. I kept expecting to feel guilt, but instead, I felt light. I started focusing on my projects again, sketching designs that made me happy, not just profitable. There was something empowering about realizing I didn't owe anyone my peace. Still, a part of me kept replaying those words, we're over. Families aren't supposed to end with a text, but ours did. In time, I learned to accept it. Maybe that was how it was always meant to be. Some ties don't need to be untied, they need to be cut. And though I didn't know it then, that message wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of finally choosing myself. The first week after that text was the quietest my phone had ever been. No calls about bills, no messages about repairs, no subtle guilt about family obligations. Just silence. At first, I didn't know what to do with it. I'd wake up expecting to hear my mom's voice, sharp but familiar, telling me how much they appreciated my help right before asking for more. But there was nothing. And in that quiet, something inside me started to breathe again. Then, the silence broke. It started with a voicemail from my mom, her tone trembling. Amelia, I didn't mean what I said. You know your father gets upset. Please, don't ignore us. I didn't respond. A day later, another came in Caleb's voice, louder, angrier. You think you're better than us now? Fine. Keep your fancy job. You'll come crawling back when you realize family's all you've got. He hung up before I could even process the venom in his words. I blocked both numbers. But they didn't stop. Emails, social media messages, even letters slipped under my apartment door. They went from guilt to threats to apologies like a broken record of emotional manipulation. My mom's messages turned from "we miss you" to "how could you abandon us?" While Caleb's turned into long rants about how I owed the family because they made me who I am. The thing was, he wasn't wrong about that part. They did make me who I was. But not in the way he thought. We met at a quiet restaurant downtown, one of those minimalist places I'd actually helped design. When I walked in, I saw them instantly. Mom looked smaller, her hair streaked with gray. Dad sat stiffly beside her, the once proud man now weighed down by something heavier than age regret. For a few seconds, none of us spoke. Finally, Mom whispered, "You look good, sweetheart." I nodded. You too. It was awkward, but not hostile. They told me about the restaurant's downfall, about how Caleb had mismanaged money for years without telling them, how it all caught up at once. He'd been charged with fraud and was awaiting trial. Mom said they'd lost everything. Savings, house, reputation. We thought we could fix it, she said softly, but we couldn't. I listened. I didn't interrupt. Part of me wanted to say, you ignored every warning I gave you, but I didn't. I'd learned that saying, "I told you so" never heals wounds, it only deepens them. Then, my father looked up at me. His voice cracked. You were right, Amelia. About everything. Hearing that from him, those exact words felt surreal. The man who once laughed at my dreams now sat across from me, humbled. For a moment, I saw flashes of the father I'd always wanted. Not perfect, just honest. Mom reached across the table, tears in her eyes. We were wrong. We treated you unfairly. And I don't expect you to forgive us overnight. But please know, not a day goes by that I don't wish we'd been better parents. I stared at her hand for a long time before placing mine over it. I forgave you a long time ago, I said quietly. I just stopped waiting for you to understand it. She began to cry. Dad looked down, silent. And somehow, that silence wasn't painful this time, it was cleansing. We talked for an hour. No dramatic apologies. No sweeping promises to start over. Just the truth. They admitted their mistakes, I shared my pain, and when it was over, we hugged carefully, like people learning to touch fire without burning. As I walked back to my car, I felt something shift inside me. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt free. That night, I sat by my window with Sunny curled at my feet and whispered, "It's over." Not like the text my mother sent that day, but in a softer way, the kind that marks the end of suffering, not love. Months later, I learned Caleb had been sentenced. I didn't attend the hearing. Mom sent me updates occasionally, short, factual messages. "He's serving time but doing okay." I replied politely, never cold, but never indulgent. My relationship with my parents became distant yet peaceful, like two neighbors sharing quiet understanding across a fence. We didn't rebuild what was broken. We simply stopped breaking each other further. One morning, as I prepared a presentation for a major client, I glanced at the framed quote hanging on my office wall. "You can't pour from an empty cup." I smiled because, for years, that's exactly what I'd tried to do. Now, I finally understood. Boundaries weren't walls. They were doors with locks only I held the key to. Looking back, that text from my mother had been both a curse and a blessing. It destroyed what needed destroying so I could build something honest in its place. I learned that love without respect is manipulation, and forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation, it means peace, quietly chosen and fiercely protected. And sometimes, peace looks like eating dinner alone, smiling to yourself, knowing you no longer owe anyone your pain. I've stopped trying to fix what I didn't break. I've stopped begging to belong where I was never meant to fit. And now, when I design spaces, I think about that, about balance, light, and comfort. The kind I fought my whole life to find. So, if you're listening and you've ever been the one holding everything together until your hands bled, please hear me when I say this. It's okay to let go. It's okay to choose yourself, even if it means being misunderstood. You are not selfish for saving your own peace. You are brave. Because sometimes, the greatest act of love is walking away. Moral lesson. True peace begins when you stop begging to be valued by people who only loved what you could give, not who you are. Family isn't defined by shared blood. It's built by mutual respect, honesty, and care. Sometimes, love means letting go of what drains you and finding strength in solitude. Healing doesn't always look like reconciliation. It often looks like quiet joy, steady growth, and the courage to start over. Always remember, setting boundaries doesn't make you heartless, it makes you whole. Choose peace, even when it costs you comfort. You deserve a love that doesn't require losing yourself. I started therapy that month. It wasn't easy. The first session, I cried before I even said my name. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Harper, listened without judgment. She asked, "What do you want from your family that they haven't given you?" I thought for a long time and finally whispered, "Respect." She smiled softly. "Then let's start with you respecting yourself enough to not chase what hurts you." That sentence became my mantra. I threw myself into work, designing a hotel lobby in Dallas that ended up featured in Modern Living. The recognition felt surreal. People clapped for the same ideas my father once dismissed as nonsense. I wanted to call my mom to tell her, to share my excitement, but I stopped myself. That chapter was over. Around that time, I began developing a new project, an eco-conscious office design for a wellness brand. It was the biggest thing I'd done yet. I poured my soul into it, staying late, reworking details, even sleeping on the office couch some nights. My business partner, Maya, would tease me, "You're going to marry this project if you're not careful." We'd laugh, but deep down, this project was more than work. It was proof. Proof that I could create something beautiful without my family's approval. 2 months into the project, I got an email from a corporate investor offering to buy the design rights. I almost didn't believe it when I read the number $1 million. My hands shook. It wasn't just the money, it was the validation, the quiet victory over years of being underestimated. I signed the deal, cried for 10 straight minutes, then poured myself a glass of champagne alone in my kitchen. For the first time, I toasted to myself. But life has a funny way of circling back when you least expect it. A week after the deal went public, my phone lit up with a familiar number. Mom's. Against my better judgment, I answered. Her voice was thin, like paper about to tear. "Amelia, honey. We heard about your big success. Your father and I are so proud of you." I could almost hear the tremble of guilt beneath the sugar. I didn't respond. She continued, "The restaurant's going through a hard time again. Caleb's made some mistakes. We were wondering if..." I cut her off. "Mom, stop. Please." There was a long silence. "You can't keep calling me when things go wrong. I'm not your safety net anymore." Her tone shifted. "How can you say that? We're family." I felt my chest tighten. "You're right, we were. But family doesn't throw you away when you stop being useful." She went quiet. Then, in a whisper, "We just need a little help this time." I hung up. It sounds harsh, but I'd spent years rescuing them from the consequences of their own choices. Every time I saved them, they loved me a little less because people who take advantage of you never respect you for staying. They resent you for reminding them of what they owe. A few days later, Caleb showed up at my office unannounced. He looked older, more desperate. His charm, the same one that had always worked on our parents, didn't touch me anymore. "You really think you can just walk away?" he sneered. "You wouldn't have that career if it weren't for us." I leaned back in my chair. "If by us, you mean the family that laughed at me, stole from me, and cut me out of their will, then, yes, I'd say I did this in spite of you." His jaw tightened. "You're cold." "No," I said quietly. "I'm just done." He left, slamming the door behind him, and I sat there shaking. Not because I was scared, but because I realized how strong I'd become. Once upon a time, a confrontation like that would have left me in tears. Now, I just took a deep breath, sent a few emails, and went back to work. Over the next few months, I stopped checking in on them altogether. Every attempt they made to reach out felt transactional, not loving. I finally learned the hardest truth of all. You can love your family deeply and still recognize that being connected to them hurts you more than it heals you. On my birthday, I received one last letter in my mailbox with no name on the envelope, just the address scrawled in my father's handwriting. Inside, a short note: "We don't understand you, but we hope someday you'll understand us." I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Some wounds don't need closure. Instead, I focused on my new life. I bought a small loft, filled it with light, plants, and colors that calmed me. I adopted a golden retriever named Sunny, who had a knack for sensing my moods and curling up beside me on rough days. My world was quiet, but peaceful. And peace, I realized, was worth more than family approval ever could be. Sometimes at night, I'd catch myself wondering if they were okay, if the restaurant survived, if Mom still thought of me. But I never reached out. Because every time I almost did, I remembered that text message, cold, final, and liberating. "Don't call or come over. We're over." They drew the line. I just learned to stop erasing it. Almost a year passed before I heard their names again. It happened by accident. An old family friend, Mr. Carson, called me one afternoon. His voice sounded heavy, the kind that carried news you don't really want to deliver. "Amelia," he said softly, "I thought you should know. The restaurant's gone under. They declared bankruptcy last month." "Caleb." "Well," He's in trouble. Legal trouble. Something about embezzlement. For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I stared at the wall across from me, tracing the soft patterns of the wallpaper I designed for a recent project. My mind should have raced with anger, or maybe satisfaction. Instead, I felt something strange, sadness, but distant, like watching rain fall on a house you no longer live in. Are they okay? I finally asked. He sighed. Your parents moved out of Tulsa. They're staying with a cousin in Stillwater. Things have changed. I thanked him and hung up. For a while, I just sat there. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to keep them from exactly this, pouring my savings, my energy, my heart into patching holes they kept making bigger. And now, here we were. Their empire had fallen, but I hadn't pushed it over. They'd done that all on their own. I didn't rush to contact them. I told myself it was better this way. But the truth was, I needed time to make sure my decision to stay away wasn't driven by resentment, but by peace. I spent that year focusing on my firm, Solace Interiors, and the life I'd built from the ground up. The company grew fast. We landed new clients, expanded into Austin, and even opened a second office in Chicago. My days were full, my nights restful. I started mentoring young designers, especially those without family support. It became my quiet mission to help people like me see that being the black sheep isn't a curse. It's an evolution. Then, one spring afternoon, as I was preparing for a meeting, I got an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Dinner? Mom." My heart skipped. I hovered over the message for a long moment before opening it. It was short. Your father and I are in Dallas for the week. We'd like to see you, even just for coffee. No expectations. Please. I stared at the screen, unsure how to feel. A part of me wanted to delete it immediately, to protect the calm I'd worked so hard to build. But another part, the small human part that still longed for closure, told me to go. So, I agreed.